Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. How are we? Welcome to the May edition of SM Advanced Forum. I hope you've had a wonderful month. We're going to be here for the next hour having a chat and informal opine on the news and latest developments in and around the industry of streaming and online video delivery and audio, actually. Anyway, as usual, I'm joined by my erstwhile hosts, Tim and Mark. Tim, are you out there? What have you been up to, sir?
I'm out here. Yep. Recovered from NAB, getting ready for SME, and I'm not muted, am I? I'm normal.
No, you're all good. I can hear you.
Awesome. I actually took a quick second and looked at my my iPhone to make sure I understood what the Celsius temperature was here. We're having an early summer. It's about 27 Celsius, which is pretty good for my part of the world. So everything that wasn't blossoming is blossoming astronomically, which means the pollen count's up and everybody has allergy problems this week.
And I presume Eric in Wisconsin isn't on air this week with us because he's still digging snow out of his garden.
In fact, when we came back from NAB, he was supposed to go out a couple hours prior to me, I think at like 7 in the morning. He couldn't go because of a snowstorm up his way. He ended up having to fly down south the next day on Friday and then fly home. So it took him almost 24 hours to get home.
Oh, yes, it's a big place, your country. You can't get anywhere in 20. If you drove 24 hours from where I live, you'd be in the sea, whichever way you went.
That's
so
true.
You got back from NAB and you recovered fine, yeah? Was it,
yeah.
Let's pick up on NAB actually once we get into the guests, because I'd be interested to find out what everyone.
And I was going to say, speaking of driving 24 hours, Mark would be about 24 hours distance from where I live at this point. So, Mark, what's happening on the West Coast?
It's gray. It's overcast. It's about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. I try to stay in Fahrenheit personally, but it's an atypical California day today. I'm sorry to announce, but things are good.
I think we got your weather over here, Mark. That's how it worked.
Yeah, darn. No, things are good. Just finished the world's largest, or the largest world premiere event that Marvel's ever done for Avengers Endgame. So I'm winding down from that and working on a couple new events for Ubisoft and Warner Brothers, and doing a lot of live, good old live production these days, as opposed to the transmission coordination and other things that we do. So it's been fun. It's been more fun than usual. But there was lots of talk of Disney Plus at the Marvel event, I must say, because that is the next wave for them. No one's really sure what Phase 4 of the movies is going to bring, so everyone's just talking about all the new Marvel shows coming to Disney Plus. And it was interesting to learn a few things about the expectations there. Expectations are high.
And do you think they're going to jump on any of that? Sorry, Tim. Do you think they're going to jump on any of that Bandersnatch type vibe, and bring some new formats out? Mark?
Oh, is that a question for me?
Yeah. Do you think that Disney will sort of, like, I think Netflix have introduced that Bandersnatch model, which I think is really one of the first times we've seen something really new done with video in the context of storytelling and so on for a while.
Yeah, now
I'm not.
They have not announced anything along those lines. I wouldn't be surprised if that comes in the future, because I don't know if you heard the YouTube announcement, but they're starting to create original content that's choose your own adventure based. And I see a lot of content creators jumping on that bandwagon. Not sure if Disney or Marvel are going to be one of those, but it would certainly make sense. It's the kind of thing that speaks to the Marvel fandom. So it'll be interesting to see. I'll ask that question of some Marvel folks and report back next time.
Yeah, and make sure that they go back and redo some of the books that were the choose your own adventure, even in the Marvel universe, because there were a few of those back, I think, in the 60s.
It's true. Yeah.
Be interesting to see if we can get there. I had just a thought. You were mentioning, sort of what's new with Disney streaming in Phase 4. If you think about it, Apple has been relying, at least up until about last year, on things that Steve Jobs had created or had imagined, and now they've sort of had to move past that. Marvel has been relying on things that Stan Lee and others created, and obviously Stan's passing. It's not that there's not extra material to work with, but sort of that creative vision model, I think will be interesting as you go into phase 5, phase 6 down the line to see whether Marvel can still do what it's done so well, especially what it did this last weekend.
Yeah, I think the equation's a little different. Stan has been the de facto leader at large of Marvel for a long time, even in the studios properties, but he hasn't really had a creative hand in a lot of the stuff that's come out. So I don't think they'll be lacking for that, and Lord knows they have a massive backlog of material to work with. Some of the stuff that they're talking about for phase 4 and phase 5 is really, really interesting. It's a little bit more niche than what we've seen. Like, everyone knows who the Avengers are, but anyone outside of the comic book fandom doesn't understand what some of the other newer properties are. So it's going to be interesting to see how they leverage Disney Plus to kind of educate the market before they start coming out with these blockbuster movies based on these lesser known properties. I think that's one of the keys to the Marvel content on Disney Plus now is using it as a tool.
Yeah, and I agree with you that there's a wide and deep amount of content to work from. I think what'll be interesting to see is whether there's hand wringing in, say, the Wall Street markets, because that was one of the things that happened right after Jobs passed. They're like, oh no, the creative light is gone. But Tim Cook was able to at least execute against a number of things, for probably 4 years or so before having to come up with other models like services. So.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, with people like Kevin Feige and the Russo brothers still in the fold over there at the studios, I think they're not hurting for any, creative influence, for any innovation, so to speak. So I don't think there's any hand wringing to be done at this point. If there's any hand wringing, it's what I mentioned about, the knowledge within the marketplace of some of this new content. I don't know if it's there. I don't think they know if it's there. So it'll be interesting to see how they bring people into the fold with properties like the stuff that's coming out on Disney Plus.
Nice. Okay, let's move on.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks. So we're going to start with Fleur. Fleur, introduce yourself. Tell us about your company and maybe a little bit about your background in the industry.
Thanks, Tim. So hi, nice to meet all you guys. So I'm Fleur Nittolo. I'm the Director of Technical Solutions for EMEA at Conviva. So most of you guys probably know us from the US base. So we're headquartered in San Francisco, and then we have locations in New York, here in London, then also across APAC. So we are very much focused on quality of experience and helping our tier 1 publishers in how they can improve their quality of experience for their customers, and then also supporting that across advertising, and how they can improve on the monetization aspect of that for them as well. So yeah, so I've been in the industry now for about 12 years. So coming back from more of a broadcast transmission background at WRN, which was the World Radio Network many, many years ago, which just after I left got acquired by Babcock, and just recently now by Encompass, and then moved to Saffron Digital, so I was more on the OVP side, and then joined here at Conviva about 4 years ago. So it's been very exciting on that kind of, when I came here in 2015 was really that precipice of, streaming explosion, and certainly from a quality of experience perspective of seeing how much our customers now, this is such a critical point for them. So it's been very interesting to see the growth of our customers in their services, but also how much the quality piece has been a big factor for them in, driving customer engagement. So yeah, very good.
The first time that I ever heard the term rum in the industry, I had to ask what it was, because Dom knows I'm not much of a drinker, but it turns out real-time user measurement, is that what that stands for? And that's the kind of thing Conviva and other companies do to try to figure out quality of experience, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and the real-time element of this is absolutely key. So, we're processing something like 1 billion events, every day for our customers, where we're capturing all of this and then putting that back to them so that they can act on this in real time. And, as we see the explosion of live sports streaming, this is absolutely critical for them, where we have customers who are, they're investing millions of dollars into these sports rights. If they have an issue on their platform where all of a sudden it starts rebuffering and customers miss a goal, that's a big problem for them. So absolutely, the real-time piece is absolutely critical.
Got it. All right, and that's sort of a nice segue to our next guest, Dror. If Fleur works on the quality of experience and you work on the total opposite end where the encoding starts. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Right. So my name is Dror Gill. I'm CTO and VP Product at Beamer. Beamer is a company that develops compression solution, encoding and transcoding products implemented in software. We support all of the standard codecs, AVC, HEVC, and our products reach very high quality and high density performance when they're implemented either on-premise or in the cloud. We started out by optimizing images and videos in a content adaptive way. We kind of created this market. And then 3 years ago, we acquired Vanguard Video, a company that's based in St. Petersburg and has excellent video encoding engineers. And together, we create the world's best codecs. And the company has 70 employees. We have headquarters and R&D in Tel Aviv, and we have the R&D branch in St. Petersburg, and then sales, marketing, business development in Palo Alto. And on top of that, I'm also the co-host of the Video Insiders podcast, which is a weekly podcast I'm doing with Mark Donegan, who is our VP Marketing. Everything you want to hear about video technology.
And
very good.
I was going to say both Dom and I have actually been guests on that and quite enjoyed it. Actually, really good format. I told Dom, I think at one point I was like, "Wow, we talked a long time when I was doing that with you and Mark Dror," and then I think Dom sort of said he doubled the length of time that we had spent.
Yeah, well, there was two of them, but. But yeah,
it's not a competition, guys. Come on.
No. It was just funny, Mark, because they said shoot for 17 minutes, and I think we're at like 37 minutes when we finally stopped. But they did a good job of sort of trimming it down to the meat. So
yeah, we edit every episode, and once you get on a topic and you start rolling, sometimes there's just no stopping.
Especially those of us who like to talk a lot. So.
Yeah, and we have several of those, but things are picking up very well, and the audience is growing tremendously. In the last month, we reached 4,000 downloads of the podcast, so it's going very well.
Fantastic.
There's a lot of need, for information analysis of what's happening, very much like you do, just in an audio-only format.
So let's talk really quickly about something that you showed at NAB. The Intel, it's not Media Sync anymore. I don't remember what
it's Media SDK. Underneath the hardware acceleration is still called QuickSync, but the but the API is called the Intel Media SDK.
And you just talk a bit about what you were demonstrating in your booth, because it was really fascinating to sort of see generic hardware in your application running with that.
Right. So as I said, we're a software company. We develop software solutions for video encoding, and we also develop those content adaptive solution where we have kind of a subjective rate control. Inside, we have a patented quality measure that tells us exactly how much compression to apply to each frame. And this works by examining several compression values. So in essence, this extends the encoding time, which means that when you're doing content adaptive encoding, it will take longer than encoding a regular file. So it's mostly suitable for VOD, although in the HD resolutions we can also do live. What we did lately is we took all of the subjective quality measure and the search for compression parameters, took all those parts out of our encoder and put them in a separate library. And this is a CABR library, Content Adaptive Bitrate Library, which is kind of an external rate control. So now you can take that library and you can integrate it with any encoder. And what we showed at NAB was integrating that library with the Intel hardware encoder through Intel Media SDK. So in essence, the Intel encoder is doing the heavy lifting of encoding each frame, and even encoding some frames with different compression parameters several times to find the best one. And our software provides the control service, and that runs on the CPU or on the GPU. And overall, you get a very high performance solution, which is content adaptive and can do live video at high resolution.
Nice. Yeah, it was impressive to see when I worked at Euclid. Of course, ours was a library as well, and so it's nice to see the market sort of moving to the option of, if you want something that's fully self-contained as a Beamer solution, or a library that could go into another encoder, as you say, which would do the heavy lifting and you do the quantization.
Right, exactly. Actually, the reason we acquired Vanguard Video was because we had excellent, rate control, subjective rate control that reduces bitrate, but no encoder vendor would integrate with us because it's kind of competing with their rate control.
Exactly.
So we understood we had to have our own encoder, so we acquired Vanguard Video and built the integrated solution. And then, after we discovered that for some applications you need higher performance, and some encoders, like the Intel one, are open and are willing to integrate with external rate controls, then you can build, such a hybrid solution where our core competency in content adaptive encoding is implemented as a library and talks to that encoder.
Cool, very cool. Dom, so we're gonna.
Can I just chip in? I've got a quick question for Dror. Dror, with the codec market at the moment, I was having a conversation internally with colleagues about diversification of codecs and consolidation of formats, transports, and codecs, and how the market's moving. I personally think that until codec pricing and any licensed format pricing starts to impact the subscriber costs and regulation comes into actually control the market, that I don't think there will be consolidation. I think that each, ostensibly Beamer as a proprietary codec platform competes with free with various other, well, notionally free, at least, other codec platforms and so on. But that just goes to prove that you can differentiate in this market and you can offer different things to the market. And I think that'll continue. But do you or any of you, that is, do you foresee further consolidation in that sort of level of the technology in the space, or do you think that we're going to, as I personally do, we're going to see a good 5 or 10 years more of diversification?
So the Beamer implementation is proprietary, but of course the compression itself is standard. We support standard AVC and HEVC encoding, and this is what is used mainly in the industry. I mean, most of the industry today is AVC, and we're seeing a very strong move to HEVC right now. In terms of implementation, everyone has a different implementation, and we are seeing companies trying to differentiate themselves on the way they do encoding. And as I said, we started this market of content adaptive encoding and released our first product in 2013. But recently, in the last 2-3 years, you see more and more companies saying we do content adaptive, we do content aware encoding, and all those kind of variations, because in the standard encoding, in the regular encoding, it's becoming a commodity, and it's tough to differentiate yourself. Although we continue to improve even the standard code on quality and performance. So I think in part this is related to the shift to the cloud. Many companies today, instead of purchasing an encoder or transcoder on a hardware platform or software, just use a cloud service for doing their encoding. So now the competition is between the cloud services. Companies who do just video encoding, like encoding.com or Bitmovin or Brightcove, and the cloud platforms, like Amazon and Microsoft, that offer their own media services. That's basically where the industry is going now, and each one of those cloud platforms is now trying to differentiate their solution with low delay or with chunked encoding that enables you to do a file on many servers very fast. So I agree that I don't think we will see a single open source implementation of the standard codecs being used everywhere, because there is still room for differentiation and improvement of quality and performance of the codecs.
So I want to draw a distinction here. When you're
Sorry,
talking about companies, are you referring to those types of cloud platforms and companies like AWS Elemental and things like that, or are you implying that there will be, or there is starting to be, some competition between the actual SVOD platforms themselves in terms of their encoding technique resulting in higher VQ for the end user, vis-a-vis like Netflix, for example?
Right. I think we are seeing that the large content providers who offer OTT services are developing their own technology. They're doing encoding in-house, and they don't use an external service, cloud service, as their encoding platform, and they want to differentiate. And indeed, the first one who talked about content adaptive encoding after us was Netflix, who came up with this notion of per title encoding and then per scene encoding. It's very important for them to show a high quality of video and use that as a differentiator for their service. And I think this kind of connects to one of the topics we wanted to talk about of a video streaming event that happened this week where the video quality wasn't that great.
That's the perfect segue, Dror. There's I think there's a lot more we could talk about on this, but I absolutely agree that we need to go talk about Game of Thrones. And if we're talking about quality of experience, user experience, and like that, I think both Dom and Fleur should sort of pitch in on it. Dom, I'll let you go first because I know it was a topic you had brought up, but I'm interested to hear sort of from the Conviva standpoint too, what are the implications of something like a major event like this not quite going up to the speed as it should have been? Dom, are you there?
I am sorry, I'm fighting with some packet breakup because we're not using any of our own streaming platforms here, so I'm skipping out. Can you repeat the question, Tim?
Yeah, sure. Dror gave us a very nice segue into the Game of Thrones event. And I know you were the one who sort of mentioned that topic. I want to hear from both you and from Fleur from a Conviva standpoint, because if we're going to compete with TV, we have to be able to deliver TV quality consistently. And it seems like we didn't really reach that with Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
and to be
the
honest,
interesting thing is that that happened. Sorry.
Go ahead, John.
The interesting thing is that the quality issue happened even on broadcast platforms, on cable and satellite, because the issue was not with streaming, the issue was with encoding.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and that's what's really interesting. Millions of dollars were invested in season 8, episode 3 of Game of Thrones, and eventually there were two major issues. One, the episode was very dark. That was kind of an artistic choice, but people were having a very hard time trying to see the video. And the second, because of this darkness and because of the limited range of brightness and colors, it screwed up the encoding, and you would see a lot of encoding artifacts such as blockiness and banding, where you see discrete stripes of color or brightness because the encoder just cannot cope with this content, which is not very typical.
And did nobody do QA prior to the airing?
That's a very good question. Mark, what do you think? Did somebody QA this episode? Did they look at the master files or the encoded files before it went on air?
I think this speaks to a lack of standards in terms of QA and what video quality means. Specific. I mean, we're talking about across the board. We're talking about very highly compressed files, even on the source end of things, so that they're easily transferable among various platforms and that sort of thing, and then they transcode from there for whatever streaming or cable or IPTV platform that we're talking about. So
which creates a concatenation effect, essentially.
Absolutely. So I think that I think these were QA'd across the board. I think they were QA'd to various standards. And I think some of those standards don't allow for things like very dark color gamuts, and and I think that's where we ran into the problem the other night. I mean, most content is a whole lot brighter than this entire episode of Game of Thrones was, and so I think that's why we're seeing what to my mind, I can't remember prior to this seeing the entire world coming together to talk about video quality and compression quality. It took something as popular as Game of Thrones to cause this discussion, and it's interesting. And I wonder if it'll spur some changes in our market, in our industry, based on the backlash that they've received on this one issue.
Do you know whether they shoot in film? Because my undergrad was cinematography, and of course we always had issues in the early days with compression to video. Because we had a really wide tonal range that you could get away with in shooting in film.
I don't think a lot of people are going to see Avengers Endgame because they want to see it on the big screen, although that is certainly a factor. They want to see it before everyone starts talking about it. It's a matter of, it goes back to the water cooler equation. Like they want to go see this content before they're out of the loop. And so with certain things like Game of Thrones, for example, with certain properties, that's very, very crucial. And there's a massive, fan base out there who care deeply about that, about seeing it first, about seeing it often, about, being able to talk about every nuance and every detail of it. I don't think that holds true for 98% of the content that's being created today. I think you could, half of the releases that come out in the theater, you could, see 2 years later and be just as satisfied with it, and perhaps some of those releases are better to watch at home, while you're Netflixing and chilling. But yeah, I think Endgame, proves, if nothing else, that cinema is still very much valid for specific types of content. That said, you've got entire theater chains across the country turning to things like Fathom events and live streaming content and esports and things like that to bolster their revenues, because everyone is staying home and watching the smaller films that they would have gone to the cinema for 5 or 10 years ago. They're just not doing that anymore. So yeah, I mean, there's certainly a shift in the marketplace, perhaps not a downturn, but a shift.
It's interesting the way you described Endgame with the water cooler, because essentially that is what live sports, why people want to watch a game live as opposed to hearing about it the next day, is to play by play. Interesting.
Absolutely, and that's why I think one of the things in getting back to the Flipboard that I found that buried in that, is it a Forbes piece? The Forbes piece about Comcast, names some numbers, pro forma results for the past year, and NBC, one would think, would be their prime property, did 3.1 billion. Sky TV did 5 billion. And that the majority of the content on Sky, if I'm not mistaken, is sports, right? So it's interesting to see that the shift there, because I don't think you could have said the same 5 years ago.
So Dror, you talked a little bit about live, primarily VOD, but do you see that with the move to the cloud, that the model of being able to do heavy enough computation lifts to do a lot of live is sort of going to become standard, or will we differentiate between VOD encodes and live encodes for the next decade?
Yeah, I think a lot of live encoding is moving to the cloud. In terms of performance, we are getting there. Our own encoder can do 4K P60 HDR and a few more ABR layers all on the same server, which means you can do a full ABR stack. Cloud. Delay in general is a key, and we're seeing a lot of effort recently going into reducing the delay when you're doing live video transmission through the cloud, reducing it both at the ingest when it's going up into the cloud, and again reducing the delay when you do the delivery itself. So you mentioned the SRT. I think Dom mentioned the SRT protocol previously for a contribution. And there's a lot of interest now in low delay CMAF for distribution, where you take a segment and you cut it into very small fragments and deliver them just in time, and even request new ones before they are created just to reduce the delay. So I think once the delay gets to a level that is similar to broadcast, then we will see a lot more shifting of live video workflows to the cloud. And we see, for example, this application of cloud gaming. Cloud gaming, where you're generating the game play in a GPU on the cloud, and you have a thin client that is used to play the game. And we've seen recent announcements from Google and from Apple about moving into this space. This requires an extremely low delay, and the cloud much lower than broadcasting entertainment video. We're talking about tens of milliseconds, and there are platforms today that do it. So I think some of those tools can be applicable for live entertainment as well, and help bridge this gap between broadcast and OTT. I think that quality was a major differentiator a few years ago, but now OTT has caught up and even went beyond broadcast, because 4K, you get over the top. Upgrading on the set-top boxes and infrastructure for 4K and cable and satellite is a nightmare. So in 4K, you first get it on OTT. HDR, you first get it on OTT. And the last remaining milestone, indeed, is reducing the delay to enable live broadcast.
Fair point. Very good. Dom, let's switch in the last 5 minutes here and talk a little bit about something you're going to be doing next week. I guess something I'll be doing.
You'll be there as well. Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
So we've got, obviously, we're all heading over to the Content Delivery Summit on Monday and Streaming Media on Tuesday and Wednesday. And for those of you that are tuned in and avid SMAF fans, come and find Tim and myself hovering around somewhere on the Monday evening, because we have a little secret SMAF party, and you've got to find one of us because there's a secret key to get in, and there'll be a live SMAF broadcast about 8 o'clock, a little bit of an unusual one on Monday, 8 o'clock Eastern time, so very late for Dror and Fleur, I'm afraid, if you're up for staying up till well past midnight, I think, in both cases. But we will be charging people the price of dropping an interesting question into a hat in exchange for a free beer on the Monday night, and then we'll be grabbing half-drunk members of the industry to come and speak to camera in the most informal of all informal SMAF broadcasts. So tune in for a bit of fun on Monday night. But more seriously,
I got to make sure Christopher Levy's there then.
Oh yes, indeed. Guns blazing.
I'll make sure to watch it. Sounds like a lot of fun.
And it's going to be a good one. And but more sensibly during the day, I'm chairing the Content Delivery Summit through the day, which should be a good one. I'm going to try and shake the bag a little bit and make it a little bit less formal and get everyone involved and participating rather than just watching a series of presentations. There's a little promo video that Eric and I did about it earlier in the week, which if you check my LinkedIn feed, you'll find. But in there, we're sort of describing the strategy where we're going to focus in on the fireside session format, because we like the idea of getting a bit deeper into subjects and panels. You tend to get 2-minute sound bites each, and then you move on. Whereas with a panel of, with a fireside chat with one or two people, we can go much deeper into topics and so on. So I'm looking forward to that. And then the streaming media through Tuesday and Wednesday. Tim, what panels are you hosting?
Interestingly, I'm doing a panel on multi-codec world. So that's good. But then I'm also doing the interviews, the almost live interviews, which will be streaming out on Facebook Live, and then they record and put a better quality copy up a bit later. And I was just looking at the list of people I'm interviewing. I've got Diane, who of course is one of the Women in Streaming co-founders. I've got somebody from Netflix, somebody from IBM, a number of other smaller companies. Those are always fun, because when I do those interviews, oftentimes it's somebody I haven't met before. And so I'm learning as the audience learns when I ask questions. I'm really excited to have somebody from Netflix, because we've tried the last couple of years to get somebody, and the engineer who's coming this time actually has a really interesting topic that I'll get a chance to talk to her about.
Brilliant, excellent. And Then I've got OTT and microservices on Wednesday, and on Tuesday we're looking at packaging strategies in my account. But there's hundreds of sessions on over the weeks. It's going to be a busy one, which is no wonder why Eric is on a yoga retreat today. So Mark, you're not going to be joining us, are you? You're producing more and more posh content, aren't you?
Unfortunately, not. Yeah, we have some West Coast events next week. I'm usually in New York for upfronts, and where I'm not this year. So it's I just walk down the block to the show usually, but that's not going to happen.
Which is a real shame, because you're the only person I know who knows everywhere in New York. You always take me to somewhere interesting, some salubrious bar or jazz outfit or tapas place. So you'll have to email me a few shots.
I will owe you one, sir.
Yeah. Well, I'll go and discover some random dive that I can show you next year for a change. So
perfect.
I've got a really good sushi place, Dom, that I'll take you to, that I went to during AES, if you're up for it.
Perfect. Looking forward to that. And Dror, you're sending a rep, aren't you? And Fleur, you're not attending? You are attending?
No, I'm in London, so I won't be attending, but I think our East Coast guys will be along there. So yeah.
Cool. Excellent.
Hop in and see them.
Brilliant. And so Tim, when do you get in?
I get in Sunday.
Okay,
I'm actually going to do something out of the ordinary for me and go to a Broadway show. I've never been to a Broadway show.
Good Lord.
Booked tickets last night. And
what are you seeing?
Wicked.
Excellent. Good starter.
Excellent. I saw it in London.
Really? I've heard good things about it. And Michelle has wanted to go to one, and so that was the one she chose. And I'm like, sure, I'll go sit in a theater for a couple hours and watch people dance on stage and sing. So.
Remember, you can't film it with your camera and live stream it. You'll probably get arrested for doing that, Tim.
That's true. Or get hired to do that, to help them on their social media. Who knows? It could be one way or the other.
No, trust me. There'll be some 12-year-old who knows more about social media than any of us, for sure.
This is true.
Brilliant. Well, look, guys, it's been really great having you all on. Mark, I won't see you next week. Tim, I will see you next week. Fleur, it's been a real pleasure to have you join us this time.
Yeah, same here. Great to meet you all, and hopefully see you soon.
And Dror, as always, a pleasure to see you. Hopefully see you maybe at IBC. Probably be the next one.
Yeah, sure. I'll be happy to. And thank you very much for hosting me today.
Not at all. Excellent. So everyone, thanks very much. We'll see. If we're not going to see you at Streaming Media East, then you're going to miss a great party on Monday night. And if you are tuned in and you want to find out, then the secret is to track me and Tim down to find the secret address of the party. Other than that, we've been Streaming Media Advanced Forum, and we'll be back in 1 month's time. Thanks very much.